Our last speaker today is Nikki Kingsley. Nikki was born in Pakistan in a Muslim family. A series of mystical experiences led Nikki to faith in Jesus Christ, which she details in her book, Thirst for Truth, From Muhammad to Jesus. Her talk today is titled, The Truth Shall Set You Free. And I think before we welcome Nikki to the stage, we may have to ask that we relocate the Msgr Rossetti fan club to another location. Thank you so much, everyone. Please welcome Nikki Kingsley.
Good evening. I'm so happy to be here and to be part of this wonderful conference. And I have to tell you, I've had a dry cough, so I'm sorry if I'll have to cough in between or get a drink of hot water. But I'd like to begin with the reading from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things came to be through him. And without him, nothing came to be. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Jesus is the light of the world. He came to shatter the darkness, but the world loved the darkness and rejected the light. The light revealed the darkness within their hearts, and they chose to crucify him. Today, truth is on trial again, and political correctness and relativism is the wood that truth is being crucified on. The world wants truth crucified, for it wants to promote an environment of sin and hedonism. And that can only flourish when the voice of truth is silenced, when sin no longer exists, when there is no right and there is no wrong. But today's attack on Jesus is more insidious. You see, today the world totally doesn't reject Jesus. They say he was a good teacher, a good man, even a prophet, a guru. But they want to strip him of his divinity. They don't want him to be God. They want him to be a man. They say he is one of the ways, and that all ways are equally true and equally good, and we have to accept that all paths lead to the same good. And in the name of love, we have to accept every lifestyle and choice. Brotherhood has become more important than God's law and truth. And sadly, even Christianity is starting to conform to the world, and the gospel is being rewritten, where forgiveness, love, and mercy is preached, but it is divorced from repentance and justice of God. And Jesus is turned into a puppet that we control based on our desires and our needs. And because some teachings are hard to follow, we say Jesus didn't really mean that. He couldn't have said that. And slowly we end up creating another altar where we are gods and Jesus serves us. And evil is being fed to us, appealing to individual feelings rather than objective good or bad. And to sound charitable, words like pro-choice and death with dignity are used instead of murder and suicide. But however sweet tasting the poison, it will still kill you. Reality doesn't change, however nice the words sound. If we call a garbage dump a rose garden, it won't change the fact that it smells bad, looks bad, and no one wants to take a walk in it. The fact is, it is still a garbage dump, no matter what name we give it. Regardless of how many people agree with a lie, it doesn't become the truth. Truth is not a slave to popularity. Whether one person believes in it or a million, whether convenient or inconvenient, truth doesn't change. I had to face this in my own life, for Jesus became an inconvenient truth for me and challenged my Muslim faith that I had lived for 40 years. I was born and raised a Muslim, and truth was always very important to me. Ever since I was a young girl, I was in search of truth. I believed in an objective truth, and I was convinced I had it in Islam. All my life, I was seeking a deeper knowledge and connection with this truth, who I considered to be Allah. And I expected to find it within Islam. I thought it would be a deeper revelation of Allah and would be within the perimeters of my Muslim faith. And one day, I encountered the divine truth, but it was not what I expected. It could not be contained in my Islamic box. And the faith that I had believed in my whole life came into question. And I found myself asking the question again, what is truth? And then the alarming thought entered my mind, what if I had had it wrong my whole life? I would like to take you with me on this journey in the quest for truth, a journey of a Muslim woman seeking truth and finding herself in the arms of truth, in the arms of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. I was born in Pakistan in a Muslim family, and in Islam there are two main sects. There's the Shia sect and there is the Sunni sect, and I was born in the Shia sect. And even within the Shia denomination there are many other branches, and I come from the most liberal branch of Shia Islam. When I was 4 years old, we moved to Africa from Pakistan, and I have two younger sisters, and my whole family moved there. My dad had a job in Africa, and that's what took us there. So we lived on the east coast of Africa in Tanzania, and then we lived in Somalia, we lived in the Congo, Kenya, and that's where I grew up and went to school. And life was very simple in Africa. We had no TV, we had no telephone at home, and it was just about family and friends, and we played a lot, and life was very simple for my sisters and I. We went to the American schools, so we learned English there. And because there wasn't too much other entertainment, I started reading a lot. And I loved reading mysteries, and Agatha Christie was one of my favorite authors. And then as I got older, I started reading romance novels. And so the books became a window into the world for me, a world that I had not explored or lived in. My parents were very kind, good-hearted people, Muslims of course, and they raised us, my sisters and I, to be good daughters, which is we were very obedient to our parents, and that is part of the Islamic culture. Parents know what's best, and especially for girls. So we grew up knowing that our parents knew better, and we are to be obedient to them. And also with faith, we were taught that we were Muslim. We believed that Muhammad was the last prophet. We loved Allah, as my parents did. But we didn't have to wear the hijab, the head covering. We wore Western clothes. We didn't have to pray 5 times a day. My parents taught us more to live our faith in practice in being kind and charitable. It was a wonderful life, carefree, loving home, and that's how I grew up. We used to come to America on vacation once a year, or we would go to Pakistan and visit family, and when we would go there, we would go to the mosque. But in Africa, there wasn't, in many places we lived, they didn't have the Shia mosque that we could go to. When I was 16, my parents arranged my marriage. And I didn't really object to that because I had been raised to be obedient. We were raised to be good wives and good mothers. That was our life focus, life mission. So when my parents arranged my marriage at 16, I didn't really object to that. And also the romance novels had really been playing in my mind, so I started dreaming of this knight in shining armor that I was going to marry. The man that they picked for me was actually from a Sunni background, but he had grown up in Africa, so they thought it was a good match. And when I graduated high school, I was 18 years old. We flew back to Pakistan, and I was married at the age of 18. And my parents left and went back to Africa. And now, for the first time at the age of 18, I was in a country that I was born in but had never really lived in. And it was a big culture shock for me. I had to wear the traditional outfits. I couldn't go anywhere until my husband or my father-in-law drove. And I had to live with my in-laws, which is also part of our Eastern Muslim tradition, that you live with your in-laws. My husband sadly did not turn out to be the knight in shining armor, so that romance story ended there. And it was a rude awakening. It was a very dark period of my life, coming to terms with a lot of different things. The situation in my marriage, living with my in-laws, which was very different than the way things were with my parents. My in-laws were Sunni, and my mother-in-law was a very devout Muslim. And she was very disapproving of the fact that I couldn't pray the namaz or read the Quran. And very quickly I learned the namaz, which is the Muslim prayer. I learned all the rituals, the cleansing and everything, and started reading the Quran. I was at a point in my life where I needed God's help desperately. I knew that divorce was not an option. That would bring shame on the family. I had two younger sisters that had to get married, and who would marry them if I got a divorce? And so my only hope out of this situation was God. And so I started to pray. And I prayed, and I prayed, and I begged Allah to save me and make a way to get me out of Pakistan. My daughter was born in the first year of my marriage, and I was reading the Quran every day. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but the Blessed Virgin Mary is very important in Islam. She's very respected, and there is actually a chapter that is dedicated to her. It's called Surah Maryam. And when I read that chapter, I was so drawn to this beautiful woman, and I wanted to know her. And I started to read that every single day, and I would just pray to Allah to save me. And thankfully, God heard my prayers, and my husband got a job in the United Arab Emirates. You might have heard of Dubai, Abu Dhabi. So he got a job there, and I was able to leave Pakistan. And that was a step, at least away from the strict life in Pakistan for me. I got away from my in-laws. I could have my own life, and I could take a taxi there and go places, so it was better. I lived there for 10 years, and my son was born there. And all through those years, I would see my parents, and I would tell them I was really unhappy, and I didn't want to stay with this man. But my parents always said, you know, you're young, you need to grow up, life isn't easy. And they just thought I just needed to mature more. But the marriage did not get better, and things only got worse. And after 10 years of living in the UAE, I was physically not doing well. I was close to a nervous breakdown, and I was suicidal. And finally, my parents took notice, and they thought maybe this is serious. So my dad asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to America, because in my heart, I just knew that if I came to America, I would be saved. Somehow I would make it. It was like a city sat on a hill that was shining. It was my light of hope. And so I had family here, and they said I could come and visit. Now my parents and everyone's thinking she just needs a break, and I'm thinking I'm never coming back. So my dad sent me money, and I bought tickets for my kids and myself. My husband at this point was traveling a lot, so I didn't tell him that I was leaving until like a day before, and I said I just need a vacation. Summer, kids are off. But I didn't say I'm not coming back. And so it's a long story. I've written my detail in my book, but it was an escape out of there with my 2 children. And I arrived in the United States in 1999 with 2 kids, couple $100, didn't know how to drive, and all I knew was I was never going back, and somehow I was going to make it. And my uncle said to me when I got there, he said, in this country, if you work hard, you can do anything you want to do, and you can be anything you want to be. And you know, he was right. This is the only country, and I've traveled a lot, where you can make a life no matter where you come from if you're willing to work hard. And I was willing to do anything to make sure, especially my daughter, to make sure she did not end up where I ended up, with no education and being a prisoner to any man or society. So my goal was to get both my children a college education so they could be free. And so I started a new life here. I got a job. My job involved driving, so I had to get a driver's license. And I was 30 years old when I got my first car. And it was the most liberating experience to be able to drive myself without needing a man to take me anywhere. And so I began a new life in America. But I was, at this point, very devout Muslim. I loved God, and I was praying 5 times a day, even though I had left Pakistan. But the love for God my parents had put in my heart, and now I was practicing it the way I could. So I would fast, I would pray, I would read the Quran, and I was concerned about my children, that if they would lose the faith living in the Western world. So I got them a Quran teacher to make sure that they learned the Quran, and I would make them pray, and they hated it. And it was a challenge for me. I had to make sure my children kept the faith. And like I said, I was praying very devoutly. Now, all my friends, I created a mini Islamic world in the United States. All my friends were Muslim. We were moderate Muslims, so we dressed in Western clothes. We assimilated. We were peace-loving. But we were very, very Muslim. We prayed, we fasted, and we followed all the tenets of Islam. So I'm doing everything I can, and now that things were normal in many ways, and I was not just praying for Allah to save me, my prayer became in seeking Allah, who He was. And I started to seek Him. So instead of begging Him to save me, I was asking Him, who are you? And my friends thought that was very strange, because they said, well, you're doing, they go down the checklist, you're doing all these things, what more do you want? And I said, I want more because I know there is more. I know it, and I know I don't have all of it, and I want it. I'm not satisfied just doing all the rituals. So what I was really seeking today, that I understand, is I was seeking a relationship with God. And that is something that Islam does not promote, because that would be very prideful to want a relationship with Allah, who is the supreme God. How could a lowly slave person want a relationship with God? But that's what my heart desired. I would be on my prayer mat praying for hours, and I would beg Allah. I'd be on the floor prostrate, and I would beg Allah to reveal himself to me and ask him, who are you? I want to come closer to you. And the more I prayed, all I saw in front of my eyes is a wall. I saw a literal wall in front of me, and there was darkness and silence. I heard nothing, no matter what I begged for and cried. But I knew what I was seeking was behind the wall, but I couldn't get behind the wall no matter how much I prayed. And this went on for months. I happened to be in New York City on vacation, and happened to go into St. Patrick's Cathedral. Now, this was a tourist stop. I had no interest in Christianity. I didn't care. I thought all Christians were going to hell. So I thought I was better. So when I walked into St. Patrick's Cathedral, I asked Allah to forgive me because these Christians believe in a Son of God. And even though Allah, I'm walking into this church, I'm sorry, I'm just here to admire the building. That's all I'm here for. And I walked into St. Patrick's that morning, and the first thing I saw was a stained glass picture of Jesus suspended, and it looked like his eyes were alive. That was the first thing I saw, and it looked like he was piercing right into me. And it made me very uncomfortable. So I walked around, but I felt like this Jesus was following me everywhere I went. And St. Patrick's Cathedral is beautiful. It's magnificent. So I admired it and everything, and I walked around. And near the exit is a little gift shop. And I stopped at the gift shop, and I was looking at things there. My kids were with me. And suddenly I heard a woman's voice whisper in my ear. And she said to me, "Come back, come back." And I looked, and there was no one there. And I thought I must be imagining, so I just turned away. And I heard her voice again, "Come back, come back." It was the most sweetest, gentlest voice. And then I knew it was Mary who was speaking to me. And as I heard her voice again, I knew exactly where she was calling me to. She was calling me to her chapel at the back of St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I had loved her so much. As a Muslim, I used to read that chapter every day. I loved her. So I couldn't just walk out and just ignore her. So I had to go back, and I went to the chapel, and I stood there, and I looked around, and everybody was kneeling and praying, and I thought, wow, how beautiful. But they're all going to hell because, because they're bowing in front of an idol, but how beautiful it looks. Poor, I felt sorry for everybody. And then I heard nothing. So I thought, okay, well, that was nice, and I left. And the next couple days that I was in New York City, I had to come back because I had encountered a peace that I had never felt before. And I would just come back for the next couple days and just spend a few minutes in the chapel. I went back home, life went back to normal, and I thought, well, that was a nice experience. And I fasted and I prayed, and that was the end of it. In December, so this was around April, so in December, first week of December, I was asleep, and it felt like somebody kind of shook me gently. And when you're sleeping very deep, if somebody just kind of gently shakes you, you're kind of in that state of half awake, half asleep, and that's where I was. And Jesus and Mary were at my bedside, and it felt like heaven had come into the room. There was so much joy and so much peace that it's even hard to describe in words. And I felt like I had met my long-lost friends, that we had known each other for an eternity, and we were just reunited. And the joy that you would feel, your loved ones that you see, after such a long separation is what it felt like. And I know that my body was still on the bed, but my spirit was not. And I was up and dancing with them and rejoicing and hugging, and we were like long-lost friends. And they talked to me about my life, and they talked to me about my mission and the purpose that I was born for. And I agreed with whatever that we talked about, and I was in agreement with it, and there was much rejoicing. And then we prayed together. And as all this happened, a light was being infused into me. When I woke up in the morning, I was no longer the same person. I physically felt different. And of course, when you wake up, you know, your mind starts to work and like, oh, that was a dream, that couldn't be anything more. But I felt different. I felt physically changed. And then I noticed that there was a presence, like a bubble of energy that was around me. And it covered me all over. And I knew it was holy. I had never doubted that it wasn't God. I knew it was God. And everywhere I went, if there was a church on the street, or if there was anything Christian, a light would shine on it, and I would be told, look at it. I had no idea that the street I lived on, had so many churches. I had no idea. I drive by every day. But after that dream, I noticed every single church. It was like I was blind, and now I could see. But everything I could see was Christian, and I'm a Muslim. I couldn't understand what was happening. And I started to get scared, because fear is a big part of Islam. You know, the fear of going to hell. And I'm thinking, why am I seeing all these Christian things? I'm going to go to hell. Allah is going to be angry with me. But then I'm thinking, but God, I asked you to reveal yourself to me, and you're the one that sent Jesus and Mary. Why did you not send Muhammad? If you sent me Muhammad, it would all fit nicely in my box. But now there is this Jesus, I don't know what to do. And Mary I can understand, because, you know, I know her. Jesus didn't fit in my box. And I started to have more dreams and more visions. And again, the details are in my book, but Mary would call me to a certain place. And when I would show up there, I physically was turned to look at Jesus, the statue of Jesus. So everywhere I went, I was being brought to Jesus. And the Jesus that was appearing to me was not the Jesus from the Quran, who is a prophet, who had a gift of healing, lived and died. The Jesus that was appearing to me came with power and authority, and I knew it wasn't just a spirit of a man or a prophet who had lived and died. He was alive. There was no question about it. And so I went through a real struggle. I couldn't understand what was happening. And every time I would have these dreams or visions, there was love was the main feeling I got. I would see a dream. There would be so much love that you feel like you're going to die that would come out of Jesus. And so I didn't know what to do with this. And this went on for about a year. I had a friend, and I started to confide in her that I'm having these dreams, and she was Christian. Again, I didn't know denominations. I didn't care to research. I didn't want anything to do with Christianity. So I would tell her, and her name was Debbie, and she would say, wow, that is amazing. You are so blessed. I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't feel blessed. This is driving me crazy. I don't want this. But she kept telling me, you're so blessed, you have to come to my church. And I said, I don't want to come to any church. I want this to stop. Well, it got to a point where I was taken down this path, and I finally it was Christmas again, and I finally came to a point where I thought, I need an answer. So I made a deal with Jesus. I said to Jesus, I will come to your church, You're going to tell me what you want from me, and then this is going to end. We're going to close this chapter, and you're going to leave me alone. So I made the deal, and I went to a church by my house. And to me, a church was a church. I didn't care what kind of church. So I thought, okay, Jesus, I'm coming to your house. I'm taking a big step, and you're going to talk to me and tell me what you want. So I went to the church for a Christmas midnight service, and it was beautiful. And the pastor did a reading. Everybody was loving, kind, welcoming, sang songs, and we processed out with candles. And I was so disappointed because I felt empty. And I said, Jesus, you're not even in your own church. Where am I going to go find you now? It was empty. It felt empty, even though it was very nice. So I saw Debbie again at work. I'm like, oh, guess what, Debbie? I went to a church. Jesus wasn't there. And she said to me, which church did you go to? So I told her. She's like, just please come to my church. I said, how's your church any different? They're all the same. She said, no, just come to my church. I'm desperate. I want all this to end. So I said, okay, I'll come to your church, but I'm not going to go for a service and waste an hour. You just take me when no one is there. I'll go in, and I'll know if that's his house or not, if he's there. And so Debbie said, fine. So we went one morning. Nobody was there. She was Catholic. Walked into the church. I took a step in. I took a breath, and I said, this is it. He lives here. I can feel him. I feel his presence. And so I said to Jesus, I have found your house. Now I know where you live. And now you're going to tell me what you want from me, and we're going to end this. And so I started going to that Catholic church every single day. When no one was there, I'd sit in the last pew, and I would argue with the crucifix. And I would tell Jesus, you're not the Son of God. There is no Son of God. What do you want from me? Why are you doing this to me? Leave me alone. And I would be so angry, and I would say all that. And then I would quiet down, and I would just start sharing with him about my day. And I would tell him what was going on in my life and work and kids and all. And then I'd leave, and I'd spend at least an hour, if not two. I'd show up the next day. I'd tell him again, you're not the Son of God. What do you want from me? Why are you doing this? And then I'd share my day and leave. And I did this for months. I hated Sundays because Sundays people came to church and I couldn't go. So I couldn't wait for Monday so it could be empty and I could go back and have my talk with Jesus. And I did this for months. And one day, Jesus had enough of me. And I walked in and sat down my usual spot, and I started, you're not the Son of God, there is no Son of God. And that day, in that empty Catholic church, I heard the voice of God echo, and I heard it with my ears. And he said to me, who are you to tell me who I can be and cannot be? If you really want to know the truth, come back like a child, and I will tell you the truth. The voice had so much power and authority, and also love. And I ran out of that church. I had no doubt God had just spoken to me. And he was right. Who was I to say that he cannot have a son? That Jesus is not the Son of God? Who was I to say that? And he gave me a choice, if you want the truth. So I didn't have to come back. But if I wanted the truth, I had to come like a child, so I could listen and learn. And he gave me a promise that day that he would tell me the truth. And I also knew that the truth was going to cost me a lot, that my life would never be the same. But I had been taken on a journey for a year and a half, and I had always wanted truth my whole life. I couldn't just walk away and never know. So it wasn't total freedom that I walked back in that Catholic church, knowing that my life would never be the same again. And I sat down, and I looked at the crucifix, and I said, "Tell me." And I was 40 years old, and I emptied my mind of 40 years of what I knew to be true, which was Islam. And I said, it could be anything. I'm open. It was within that split second that I did that a bolt of light came from that crucifix, hit me on my heart, went through my body, and I fell on my knees for the first time. I had never bent my knees. It's like my knees crumbled. And all I could say is, I believe you are the Son of God. I believe. Because at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess that he is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. And when he stood before me, I couldn't deny him anymore, because he was the truth. Truth was not a philosophy or an idea or somebody's ideology. Truth was a person, and his name is Jesus Christ. And when he stood before me, I had to fall on my knees, and I knew. And I sobbed, and I cried, and I cried. It was like I had been seeking this treasure, this pearl, and it had been given to me now. And I could barely take it in. It was the greatest treasure somebody could have, is the gift of truth. And as I accepted Jesus, in that moment, that wall that had been in front of me, I physically saw it crumble. And as the wall crumbled, behind the wall, what I had always wanted and couldn't get to was God the Father. And the love of the Father was so intense. There were like waves of love coming at me. And he said to me, I have waited so long for you. I was trying to get behind the wall, but I was denying the Son. And the only way to get to the Father is through the Son. You know, I was a good Muslim. I was a good person. I was trying to do everything right. I wasn't a murderer. I wasn't doing anything bad as such. But I was on the outside. I was on the other side of the wall. I was a slave, and God was behind the wall. But it was in accepting Jesus that I was able to enter into the Father's embrace, that I could call him Father, Abba, Baba, as I call him. I had no relationship. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. He doesn't say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to God except through me. He said, no one comes to the Father except through me. So we can be good people and love God and be on the outside, or we can accept Jesus Christ as the Son of God and our Savior and come into relationship and get adopted into the family of God. And that is what happened to me. I became a daughter in that moment because I accepted the Son. It is only through Jesus that we get to the Father and we come to know him, because that's what Jesus said. That's what he came for, so he can reveal the Father's heart to us. Everything that I experienced in my journey, the beauty of it all was I had freedom all the way through. Even in my dreams and all, there was no compulsion, there was no fear. I never felt afraid. I didn't feel afraid. I was afraid in my Muslim mind, but I was not afraid with what was being revealed to me, did not carry threat or fear. I had freedom to choose all the way through. It was always an invitation of love, that God was inviting me and he sent his son to save me. My spiritual director said to me, "You're not free to say yes unless you're free to say no." And that has been the best lesson I have learned, that when we talk about freedom, it's not about just doing whatever you want to do, but it's about having the strength to be able to say no to something. And when you can say no to it, then you can say yes to it, because now you're free. But when you feel this compulsion that you just have to, you're not free. So true freedom is when you can say no, and I had that. The way Jesus invited me, I could have said no and walked away, but I chose to say yes. I'd read all these love stories and mysteries, and when I met Jesus, I found the greatest love story and the greatest mystery, because even today it's a mystery to me. And as a Christian, we live in the greatest love story and mystery. There is no greater love story that has ever been written than the Bible. The love of the Father for us, that he sent his only begotten Son. And you know, truth does cost us, and it cost me too. It cost Jesus his life. Jesus came to witness to the truth. He said to Pilate, "For this I have come." He came to witness to truth. And so truth doesn't come cheap, because truth is most valuable. And it cost me a lot too. My parents, of course, first of all, well, my children were happy. The Quran teacher was gone. They didn't have any of that. So the kids were good. And they were like, "Yes, Mom, you should go to church." So no problem there. But after that, after the kids, my parents, it was a real struggle with them. My mom got sick. When they found out, they were like, "This is the worst thing that could happen. We must have failed some way or another." And it was very difficult for me. I felt very guilty. But I couldn't take what I had found. My parents said, "Go to church, just don't convert." I'm like, I can't live. I found truth. I can't live a lie. And this meeting Jesus has put a fire in my heart that burns, a fire of love, that I just want everyone to know the good news. How am I going to hide this? How do you put this light under a bushel basket? I couldn't do it. It was bursting out of me. So that was very hard. My parents, suffered a lot with that, but, we're in good terms now. And I lost all my Muslim friends, slowly, one by one, because to stay friends with them, I would have to kill my joy and compromise and be politically correct, and I couldn't do it. And Jesus, even though I lost everything in that way, and I was alone, no friends, Jesus was enough. The joy that I had was enough. And then I came a bigger cross. You see, when I came to America, and a few years later, I had remarried. And when Christ entered into my life, my husband slowly started to feel repulsed by that. And when the light of Christ comes, it reveals darkness, and a lot of things came into light that I wasn't aware of. And it left me no choice but to leave that marriage as well. And that was a very painful, difficult cross. But Jesus was enough in the suffering too. Jesus is faithful. And he is faithful, as I can tell you that there have been great conversions in my family after me. My sister followed a couple of years after me and became Catholic. And there are others on the way as well. And when I had the conversion, I thought, okay, I got saved, that was it. Well, my children did, then my sister did, and, more is coming. And Jesus has such a big plan for us. We underestimate what God's plan is. We just think, oh, it's just this, but God is so big, and he wants to do so much more in our lives. We have a desire to fit in as human beings, but as Christians, we are not meant to fit in. We are meant to stand out. That's what we are, the salt of the earth. We are not meant to just blend in everywhere. But the world tells us we have to do that. And we have a choice. Either we're going to be politically correct Christians, which is no Christian at all, because Jesus was not politically correct. If he was, he wouldn't have gone to the cross. He could have changed and said his words and said, I didn't really mean it when I said, take this as my body and eat, or this is my blood. He could have said, it's just a symbol. But he didn't. He never changed a word what he said, because the gospel cannot be changed. It is eternal. And either we accept it or we walk away. But we can't straddle both. And we have a choice to make today more than ever, whether it's Jesus or the world. In 1 Corinthians it says, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake the table of the Lord and the table of demons. We have to decide which table we are going to sit at. Because see, there are two tables. There's the table of the world, where there is every kind of food in abundance, everything you could ever want. It's overcrowded, but there is greed, and there is a hunger that is never satisfied around that table. And then there is the table of the Lord, where all there is bread and wine. But there is peace, and with that one piece of bread, you are satisfied. It is the bread of life. And you and I are invited to the feast of heaven and earth. And we have been given a seat at this table. Let us not leave this seat to run to the world. This truth was purchased at a great price. A lot of blood has been shed for this truth. And today you and I are the witnesses of this truth. You and I are the apostles of today. Let us not abandon the Lord. And let us stand by him. And let us be true to him. Let us be his witnesses in today's world. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Hallelujah.